Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. How much money is enough? John D. Rockefeller is considered to be the wealthiest American of all time. Forbes magazine had the following insights about Rockefeller's wealth. By the time Rockefeller died in 1937, his assets equaled 1.5% of America's total economic output. To control an equivalent share today would require a net worth of about $340 billion, more than 4 times that of Bill Gates' worth, currently the world's richest man. Rockefeller had money beyond belief. He owned gorgeous mansions. He created and he led prosperous businesses. The man had it all. And at the peak of his wealth, when he could buy anything in the world that he wanted to buy, he was asked in an interview, how much money is enough? And his answer was always $1 more. In other words, there's never enough money to satisfy his need. Money's a strange thing, isn't it? We put all this value in paper and little metal coins. We don't devote our lives to earning it, saving it, hoarding it, coveting all the things that it can buy. And in our culture, we're encouraged to put our faith in the dollar and its buying power. To dream of becoming millionaires ourselves and the fantastic life of the rich and famous that we would live if only I'd win the lottery. You know, it's interesting statistically, 1 in 3 lottery winners go broke within the first 2 years of winning. Why is that? It's because of this notion that the more stuff that I acquire somehow brings an abundance of life. And the stuff is never enough. So you buy more stuff, and it's still never enough. Our culture teaches us that having things is the root of happiness. And to get more things, well, we need more money. So we spend our lives chasing after the ever-elusive $1 more. So that way, maybe one day, finally, we can have the best possible life. And we exchange this hard-earned currency for the things that we truly value. These things become our treasures. They become what we live for. But we always find these treasures aren't enough. It always takes $1 more. And then maybe, finally, I'll be happy. This isn't a new phenomenon. This $1 more mentality is as old as money itself. In today's lesson, Jesus was preaching and he's teaching, and a man stops him and says, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide his inheritance with me." In other words, I feel like I'm being slighted here. I'm not getting my fair share. I deserve more. And Jesus tells the man, I'm not interested in getting into a financial dispute between you and your brother. But instead, Jesus offers him some sound pastoral advice. Take care. Be on guard against all covetousness, for your life does not consist of the abundance of possessions. Jesus is telling him that it doesn't matter how much inheritance you got. It doesn't matter how much you think you're owed. What the problem is, what really matters here, is that you want it too much. Jesus says, be careful here. You're about to walk on a slippery slope that's actually, you think, is going to lead you toward life, but it's going to lead you away from it. Jesus tells the man, the sum total of your life is not stuff. The abundance of your possessions will never give you life. It will never be enough on their own. More stuff does not equal a happier life. So take care of what you put your value on, what you consider treasure. And then you know he's messed up and said the wrong thing. Because Jesus is going to tell him a parable. Anytime Jesus tells a parable, you messed up. Right? And in this parable, we're told about a wealthy farmer whose land had a bountiful harvest. Now, to be clear, Jesus is not picking on wealthy farmers, and Jesus is not picking on successful people in general. It's not that this farmer is wealthy that gets him in trouble. It's what he does, or more directly, what he does not do with his wealth that's going to get him in trouble here. This man has been blessed with so much plenty that he's run into a problem. He has run out of places to store his crops. Now, does the farmer say, wow, I've got so much here, I have enough for my family, I got more than I know what to do with, I'm going to take the rest and I'm going to share it with my neighbor. There are people who need this. Or does he at least think to offer God, the source of all these blessings, some gratitude? Nope. Farmer decides to tear down the barn he already has. He spends money, he spends resources to build bigger and better barns. That way he can store up his excess harvest and hoard it for himself. He has so much abundance that he doesn't even know what to do with it all. But the one thing he's certainly not going to do with any of it is share it. Certainly not going to give anybody thanks for it other than himself. And finally in the story, the farmer at least prays. But the problem is he doesn't pray to God. He prays to himself. Soul, talking to himself, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax. Eat, drink, and be merry. This farmer thinks about nobody but himself. Right? I planted the seed. I took care of the crops as they grew. I harvested the crop. I built the barns. And I will use the proceeds of my labor all for my pleasure. Farmers lived a self-centered life in the pursuit of wealth and the pursuit of treasure, all for his own benefit. It's all about me, me, me. He's so self-centered that the only person in the story he talks to, indeed the only person in the story he prays to, is himself. He only cares about how his efforts are going to produce things that, at least in his mind, is going to give him abundant life. And God speaks in the story and says, you fool. This night your soul's going to be required of you. You prepared all these things. But where will they be? You spent your entire life pursuing things and building up treasures all for yourself. And now it's not for nothing. You can't take stuff with you when you die. The farmer's not called a fool because he's successful. The farmer's called a fool because of what he considered to be treasure and what he decided to invest in. The farmer did not invest in relationship with God and neighbor. Instead, he invested in the pursuit of stuff and the pursuit of comforts that never last. Jesus says the man is a fool because he laid up his treasure all for himself and is not rich in God. Not rich in God, that's a weird statement, and this is the only place in the Bible that you'll find this phrase, rich in God. So I had to myself look up, what does it mean to be rich in God? It means to stop treating stuff like it's going to give us life. It means knowing God and having a real relationship of integrity with the holy, where we seek His righteousness. Being rich in God means counting God as our treasure and pursuing that treasure with the kind of drive that we pursue money and stuff. Unlike money and things, God is the creator and the author of all life. God gives us life. God gives us hope. God gives us peace. These are promises of God. Money and stuff may promise all of those things, and we may feel some of those things when we get it, but it's temporary. How quickly that feeling is replaced with the need for just $1 more. There's another quote from Rockefeller I want to offer you. It's not as famous as the other one. And I understand he said this one toward the end of his life. He said, quote, "After it all, the religion of man is his most important possession." End quote. The wealthiest man in all of American history said that after all the money he's made, after all the property he's owned, after all the businesses that he has successfully built, stuff's not that important. You can believe him. He had all the stuff, and it never fulfilled him. $1 more was never enough. The most important possession for him was faith. The thing worth most investing in is relationship with God and neighbor. Rockefeller finally came to understand what Jesus was telling the man in today's story. Take care. Be on guard. Don't be covetous. Not for stuff, because you are so much more. Your life consists of more than the abundance of things. You were created not to chase after money and stuff. You're created in the divine image of God, all for God's glory. Not the image of wealth, for the glory of ourselves. To live for God, to be rich toward God, is the path to life, and life abundantly. To live for wealth and glory and glorify ourselves, in the end, is meaningless and amounts to nothing. The farmer in the parable had lots of stuff, but it didn't amount to anything in the end. Jesus says today, be careful. Don't let the same thing happen to you. But this is hard advice for us to follow in the 21st century. I mean, we're TV ads, radio ads. I mean, we're covered all the time, everywhere we go on the phone with ads that tell us that will never be enough. You're never going to be happy. You're never going to be fully alive until you buy this thing. To be clear, there's nothing wrong with having things. Things make our life easier. Things help bring us joy. But Jesus says the problem comes in is when we define these things as our treasure. When the thought of not having these things now brings us grief and anxiety, that's when we know it's become a treasure. When things begin to control us instead of the other way around. The new American dream seems to be where everybody is overworked to pay for things that none of us can afford. People are working so much. They can't even enjoy the things that they bought that the ads promised them was going to bring them abundant life. At best, and you hear this all the time, I'm just working for the weekend, for a chance at a breath of peace. A breath we could have every moment of every day if we're rich in God. In today's lesson, Jesus cautions us against falling into this lie that our life is equivalent to the abundance of possessions. He asks us to consider when enough is enough. The farmer in the parable had more than enough for himself. He had extra he could have shared with his neighbor. The farmer never thought to thank God for all the blessings that God had given him. I mean, because after all, doesn't it take rain? Doesn't it take sunshine in equal measure for a harvest to come in? Doesn't it take a strong back and a life relatively free from illness to do the hard work as a farmer? Aren't these all blessings of God? Farmer never thought about God. He certainly didn't think about his neighbor, because he was way too busy. He was way too busy chasing after possessions that he thought was going to bring life. God blessed the farmer that the farmer might be a blessing to other people. Instead, the farmer took God's blessings and he used them to glorify himself. Church, many of us have been blessed beyond measure. When we suffer first world problems. Not everyone enjoys blessings like food, clean water, shelter with air conditioning and heating, adequate clothing to protect us from the elements. Most of us have these things on demand. But we forget. And in today's culture of hyper-consumerism, we forget all about the blessings, and we forget about God, where all these blessings came from. Instead, we are put in an endless pursuit of $1 more. And today, Jesus challenges us to stop and say, what I have now in this moment, it's enough. In fact, it's more than enough. I have enough for me. I have enough for my neighbor. And my heart overflows with thanksgiving to God because I can be a blessing to someone else. He invites us to change our prayers from asking God for more stuff to asking God to teach us how to invest in a relationship with Him. To teach us how to invest in our neighbors as much as we invest in ourselves. We begin to pray that our hearts are transformed so we can stop living in this mindset of $1 more and start living for God and our neighbor. Because Jesus tells us that that kind of investment, it is wise and it's life-giving, and it will always be enough to satisfy our souls. Amen.